If anyone had told me that night would end with my husband's boss holding my hand in front of an entire ballroom and saying he had spent 20 years searching for me, I would have laughed because the idea sounded impossible. Not romantic impossible, ridiculous impossible. The kind of impossible that belongs to women in movies with better lighting and braver voices, not to a 43-year-old woman standing near the appetizer table in a navy dress her husband approved because he said the green one made me look like I was trying too hard. My name is Evelyn Carter. For 18 years, I was Preston Carter's wife, first, and myself somewhere far behind that, so far back that some days I could barely hear my own name unless somebody needed me to sign something, cook something, smooth something over, or stand beside him looking pleasant. That night, Whitfield Holdings was celebrating its 25th anniversary at the Marriott downtown. Everything about the ballroom looked expensive in the quiet way expensive things often do. Crystal chandeliers, white roses in tall glass vases, a string quartet playing near the stage, men in tailored suits standing in circles that opened and closed depending on who mattered enough to enter. Preston had spent nearly an hour in our bedroom getting ready. He stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks, then his tie, then the cufflinks again, while I sat on the edge of the bed with 2 dresses laid across my lap. "Wear the navy," he said without looking at me. I was thinking about the green. His eyes moved to me in the mirror. Not cruel exactly. Tired, like my preference had created unnecessary paperwork. "Evelyn, tonight is important. The board will be there. Harrison Whitfield will be there. I need you looking polished, not dramatic." I folded the green dress back over my arm. "And please," he added, finally turning toward me, "try not to talk too much. You know how you get when you're nervous." I wanted to ask what he meant by that, though I knew. I had known for years. He meant the laugh that came out a little too full when I was trying to be friendly. He meant the way I sometimes filled silence because silence made me feel judged. He meant the stories about my aunties, my old waitressing days, my mother singing in the kitchen on Sunday mornings, all the pieces of me that did not fit neatly into the corporate wife shape he preferred. So I wore the navy dress. I smoothed my hair into a low twist, put on small pearl earrings his mother once said were appropriate, and stood beside him in the elevator down to the lobby like a woman trained by years of small corrections. On the drive, Preston went over the rules without calling them rules. If Terrence Mills comes over, don't mention his divorce. If Janet from compliance asks about my promotion track, just say I'm excited about the future. Don't bring up your volunteer thing at the church pantry unless somebody asks what you've been doing. And Evelyn, he glanced over as he changed lanes. Just be easy tonight. Easy. That word sat in my lap the rest of the drive. Inside the ballroom, Preston became the version of himself he loved most. Shoulders back, smile bright. One hand always ready to clap another man on the shoulder. He laughed louder than the jokes deserved and leaned in when executives spoke, giving them the attentive face he rarely wasted at home anymore. For the first 20 minutes, I followed a step behind him. "This is my wife, Evelyn," he said twice. Both times, the person he introduced me to shook my hand, gave me a polite smile, and turned back to Preston before I finished saying hello. After that, he stopped introducing me. I drifted toward the appetizer table, where I could hold a glass of white wine and look occupied. I was good at looking occupied. Years of marriage to Preston had taught me how to disappear without seeming rude. Stand near the wall. Smile if someone looks over. Do not laugh too loudly. Do not add too much to the conversation. Do not correct your husband when he tells a story wrong. Do not become the reason his jaw tightens in the car afterward. At one point, he came to find me. His hand closed around my upper arm, firm enough to warn, but not hard enough to leave a mark anybody could see. "What are you doing?" he asked through a smile. "Standing here." "Exactly. You're standing here like you don't know how to behave in public. Smile more. Say something if people talk to you. Don't embarrass me." The words were quiet, but they landed with the weight of 18 years behind them. "Do not embarrass me." I looked at him in his charcoal suit, the gold watch he bought after his last promotion, the expression on his face that said my existence was something he had to manage, and I felt the old ache settle beneath my ribs. It had lived there so long I almost mistook it for part of my body. "Okay," I said. That was my usual answer. Okay. It kept dinner from going cold. It kept doors from slamming. It kept his mother from calling to ask why Preston sounded upset. It kept my own mother from worrying because she had enough on her plate and had raised me to endure more than I should have. In my family, quiet women were praised as strong women. We were told not to put our business in the street. We were told every marriage had hard seasons and a wise woman knew how to cover her home. So I covered mine until I was the one suffocating under it. Preston left me there and rejoined a group near the bar. I watched him laugh with men whose names he repeated at home like scripture, board members, senior vice presidents, people with the power to move him into the office he wanted on the 23rd floor. He looked so alive among them that I wondered, not for the first time, whether the dullness in our marriage was something I had caused simply by being the wrong audience. Then the room changed. It happened slowly at first. A hush moving from the entrance to the center of the ballroom, people turning their heads, conversations thinning into murmurs. Preston straightened before I even saw who had walked in. Harrison Whitfield. I knew him only through Preston's stories. Chairman, founder, the man who had turned one regional logistics contract into a national empire. Preston spoke his name with a mixture of hunger and fear, the way ambitious men talk about the person whose signature can change their tax bracket. Harrison was in his early 60s, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped silver hair and deep brown skin that made his white dinner jacket look sharper than anybody else's tuxedo in the room. He moved through the crowd without rushing. People leaned toward him. He shook hands, nodded, said just enough to make each person feel briefly chosen. But his eyes were searching. I noticed that before I knew why. He would greet someone and look past them, scanning faces, pausing, moving on. I thought maybe he was looking for his wife or a board member or someone important enough to make the whole ballroom hold its breath. Then his eyes landed on me. The expression on his face changed so completely that I looked behind me to see who he had seen. There was nobody there. He stopped in the middle of a sentence. The woman in front of him kept smiling for half a second before realizing he was no longer listening. Harrison stared at me across the room, and something moved through his face that I could not name. Shock first, then disbelief, then a kind of grief so old it looked almost like relief. He started walking toward me, not toward Preston, toward me. The crowd opened for him. Of course it did. Powerful men rarely have to ask people to move. They simply decide where they are going and the world adjusts. I stood frozen by the appetizer table with my wine glass in my hand, wondering if I had done something wrong, wondering whether I had somehow embarrassed Preston by breathing in the wrong direction. Harrison stopped in front of me. Up close, I could see that his eyes were wet. "It's you," he said. His voice was so quiet I almost missed it beneath the quartet. "I'm sorry," I said. He reached for my hand, then hesitated like he remembered manners in the middle of emotion. "May I?" I was too stunned to do anything but nod. He took my hand in both of his. His hands were warm. They trembled. "I've spent 20 years looking for you." The room went silent, not almost silent, silent. The quartet kept playing, but even they seemed to soften, as if the music knew it had become background to something none of us understood. Harrison kept speaking, his voice steadier now, though emotion still roughened the edges. I had left Charlotte too late. I was 29, newly divorced, angry at myself, angry at God, drinking more than I should have been, driving faster than I had any right to drive. I hit black ice on a curve and went off the road into a ditch. The driver's side was crushed. I couldn't open the door. I couldn't feel my legs. My fingers tightened around the stem of the wine glass. The ballroom blurred a little. A woman stopped, he said. She was coming the other direction in an old Honda. She climbed down into the ditch in the freezing rain wearing a diner uniform and no coat. She pried that door open with her bare hands until her palms bled. She dragged me far enough away from the car that when the engine caught, the fire didn't take me with it. The memory came back not as a picture, but as weather. Cold rain soaking through my uniform, my feet sliding in mud. I remembered telling him to keep talking because I was afraid if he got quiet, he would leave the world before help arrived. But I had not known his name, and after the hospital nurse said he was being taken to surgery, I had gone back to the diner because my shift manager hated excuses and Rent did not care about heroism. "I only had a first name," Harrison said. His voice cracked. "Evelyn. That was all the nurse wrote down. No last name, no address. By the time I woke up, you were gone." I heard someone whisper behind him, "That's Preston's wife." Another voice answered, "Preston knew?" I looked past Harrison and found my husband near the bar. Preston's glass was frozen halfway to his mouth. His face had lost all its color. He looked at me as if I had become a stranger in the time it took a powerful man to cross a room. "I didn't think it mattered," I said quietly. Harrison stared at me. "You say she now?" I had spent years letting that happen because it seemed easier than fighting for space I had been taught not to need. Harrison looked at him politely. "Mrs. Carter is my guest tonight?" It was not said loudly. It did not have to be. The line appeared anyway. I saw Preston understand it in real time. His boss, in front of the board and half the company, had separated me from him. Not cruelly, not dramatically, clearly. Harrison offered his arm. I took it. As we walked across the ballroom, I felt hundreds of eyes on my back. The old me would have counted every stare as danger. That night, I let myself feel the weight of being seen and discovered it did not crush me. At the head table, people spoke to me carefully at first, like I might vanish if startled. A board member named Celeste asked what I did these days. Her tone was kind, but I felt the old shame rise immediately. I almost said, "I don't work." That was how Preston described it. "Never Bergen." "Then tonight." He shook his head and laughed once quietly. "Tonight I found you standing in a corner while your husband told you not to embarrass him." My throat tightened. Across the room, Preston was watching us. Not worried, not sorry, angry. He hated this. He hated that I was sitting where he wanted to sit. He hated that Harrison Whitfield had crossed a ballroom for me. He hated that for one evening I was not an extension of his reputation, but a person whose history had nothing to do with him. "I don't regret leaving the hospital," I told Harrison. "I wasn't trying to be mysterious. I had a shift. My mother needed rent money. I thought once the doctors had you, my part was over." "Maybe your part in that night was," Harrison said, "but not in the life that came after." The gala ended near 11. By the time I found my coat, Preston was waiting near the parking garage elevator with his arms crossed. His smile from the ballroom was gone. What remained was the face I knew best. Tight and controlled, his anger dressed in quiet so outsiders would never hear it coming. The elevator doors closed. He did not even wait until we reached the car. "What the hell was that?" His voice bounced off the concrete walls. "What?" "Don't play dumb, Evelyn. You knew the chairman of my company for 20 years and never thought to mention it?" "I didn't know him. He knew you. I helped a man in an accident. I didn't know his last name. I didn't know he was your boss. I didn't even remember his face until he told the story." Preston laughed, sharp and ugly. "Convenient." The elevator opened. We walked into the parking garage, the air cold and smelling faintly of oil. "You made me look like an idiot in front of the entire company," he said. "Do you know what people are going to say on Monday? That I didn't even know my own wife? That you've been sitting on some connection to Harrison Whitfield this whole time." "I wasn't sitting on anything." "Then why didn't you tell me?" I stopped beside the car. "Would you have cared?" He turned toward me. "Excuse me?" "If I had told you years ago that I once pulled a stranger from a wreck, would you have cared? Or would you have found a way to make me feel foolish for bringing it up?" His face hardened. "This is exactly what I mean. One night of attention, and suddenly you think you're somebody else." There it was. The truth under everything. I had not changed in the last 3 hours. A room had simply treated me differently, and Preston already considered that dangerous. We got into the car. He drove too fast through downtown, one hand tight on the wheel. "And what was all that hand-holding?" he asked. I turned my head slowly. He was emotional. A man like that doesn't cry over some waitress from 20 years ago unless there was more to the story. The accusation sat between us, filthy and small. I stared at him. "You are not asking that because you believe it. You're asking because you need to make me smaller again before we get home." He did not answer, so I kept going because something had opened in me and I did not know how to close it anymore. "You were embarrassed by me before Harrison Whitfield ever saw my face. You were embarrassed when I chose the wrong dress, embarrassed when I laughed, embarrassed when I spoke, embarrassed that I never finished my degree because you told me our money needed to support your career first, embarrassed that the life I built around you didn't come with a title you could brag about." "Lower your voice." "No." The word startled both of us. Preston looked over at me. "What did you say?" "No." It was such a small word. I had used bigger ones my whole life with less effect, but this one landed in the car like a door closing. His voice dropped. "You'd better be careful. If this turns into gossip, it reflects on me, on my career, on everything I've worked for." "Of course," I said quietly. "There it is." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means even now you're not worried about what happened to me tonight. You're worried about what people will think of you because of it." He said nothing for the rest of the drive. Neither did I. But silence felt different now. It was not the silence of surrender. It was the silence of a woman hearing very clearly the first crack in a wall. Monday morning, Preston was called into Human Resources before 9. I did not know that right away. I only knew something was wrong because he did not text me all morning with his usual small demands. Pick up dry cleaning, confirm dinner with his mother, remind me what time the contractor is coming. At 2 in the afternoon, he called from his office, voice tight in a way I had never heard. "Did you say anything to Whitfield about me?" I was standing in the grocery store aisle holding a bag of rice. "No. Don't lie to me. I haven't spoken to him since Friday night." Preston breathed hard into the phone. "They're reviewing my expense reports." "Who is?" "Internal audit, HR, legal, everybody, apparently." I said nothing. "This is retaliation," he snapped. "Because of you." "Because of me?" "Because Whitfield has some sentimental obsession with you and now he's looking for reasons to come after me." I put the rice in my cart slowly. "Did you give him reasons?" The silence on the line told me more than any answer. Over the next 3 weeks, the truth came out in pieces. Preston never confessed anything all at once. Men like him rarely do. They leak facts only when denial becomes too inconvenient to maintain. First, it was the expense reports. Hotel upgrades marked as client necessity. Meals submitted twice. Mileage that did not match the trip logs. Nothing dramatic enough to make the evening news, but enough to show a pattern. Then came the proposal. 2 years earlier, a junior analyst named Kiara Bennett had created a cost reduction model that saved the company millions across 3 distribution centers. Preston had mentored her, which apparently meant taking her spreadsheet, reformatting the title page, presenting it to senior leadership, and allowing everyone to believe the strategic insight was his. That presentation had helped secure his promotion. Then someone found the old internal profile. Preston Carter, family man, community leader, rising force in operations. There was a photo of us from a company picnic, my hand tucked through his arm, my smile bright because I still knew how to make one reach my eyes back then. The article described our marriage as his foundation, his proof of balance, his reason for working so hard. Reading it on my laptop, I almost laughed. At home, that same man had spent years telling me I did not understand his world. In public, he had used me to decorate it. Harrison had not ordered an investigation because of jealousy. I understood that later. He had simply looked more closely at the man who had been ashamed of the woman who saved his life, and what he found was not difficult to see once someone important cared enough to look. Preston called it a campaign. He called it politics. He called it everything except consequences. 3 weeks after the gala, Harrison called me. I stared at his name on the screen longer than necessary. He had gotten my number through his assistant, who had asked permission through email first. That mattered to me. Small boundaries matter a great deal when you have lived with a man who treated access to you as a marital right. "Evelyn," Harrison said when I answered, "I wondered if you would be willing to meet me for coffee. No pressure, no audience. I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For turning your life upside down." I almost told him he had not done that. Then I realized he had, just not in the way he meant. We met at a small coffee shop downtown, not one of the polished places near his office. I chose it because the woman behind the counter knew my name from church pantry meetings, and because I wanted to sit somewhere, I still felt like myself. Harrison was already there when I arrived. Without the ballroom around him, he looked less like a chairman and more like a tired man in a gray sweater who stood too quickly when he saw me. "Thank you for coming," he said. We sat near the window. For a minute, neither of us performed ease. "I have thought about that night every day," he said finally. "The gala, I mean, not Route 9. I already thought about that every day." I smiled despite myself. "That's a long time to think about a ditch." "It was a very important ditch." The small joke softened something between us, then his expression sobered. "I walked into that ballroom wanting closure. I had imagined finding you for 20 years, and in every version, I was dignified, grateful, controlled. I did not imagine crying in front of 300 people and detonating your marriage before dessert." "You didn't detonate my marriage." "It seems like I lit the match." "No," I said. "You opened a curtain. What was behind it was already there." He looked down at his coffee. "I need to be clear about something. I am not here to pull you away from your husband. I am not using what happened 20 years ago, or my position, or anything happening at the company to make you feel obligated to me." I studied him carefully. "Good." He nodded once, accepting the firmness in my voice without offense. "You saved my life. That does not mean your life belongs in my hands." I spent a long time thinking of you as an idea, a woman brave enough to stop in a storm, a woman who vanished before I could thank her. But you are not an idea. You are a person. And I do not want my gratitude to become another thing you have to manage. My throat tightened. I had not known how badly I needed to hear that until he said it. For 18 years, Preston's needs had become weather in our house. If he was tense, the whole house changed temperature. If he was proud, we all stood in the light of it. If he was embarrassed, I became the thing to fix. Even love had started to feel like a job with no time off. Harrison's gratitude could have become another obligation. He was promising it would not. 20 years ago, he said quietly, you helped me live. Today, I hope you stop disappearing from yours. I looked out the window at people crossing the street with umbrellas folded under their arms. I don't know how, I admitted. Then don't know yet, he said. Just don't let anyone convince you that not knowing means you should stay where you are. That evening, Preston came home with flowers, grocery store carnations, pink and white, still wrapped in plastic, the price sticker half torn off. I owe you an apology, he said, standing in the kitchen like a man rehearsing sincerity. I was chopping onions for dinner. I kept chopping. For what? He blinked. For the way I reacted after the gala. I was under pressure. You know how important this job is. I said things I didn't mean. Which things? Evelyn. No, I'm asking. Which things didn't you mean? That I embarrassed you? That I made you look like an idiot? That there must have been something improper between me and a bleeding man in a ditch 20 years ago? Or that I needed to be careful because your career mattered more than what happened to me? His mouth tightened. I came home to apologize. You came home because internal audit found things you don't want them to find. He did not answer quickly enough. That was answer enough. The night I finally left did not feel dramatic while it was happening. Preston had come home late from another meeting with HR. His face looked gray under the kitchen light. He sat across from me at the table and told me, without quite meeting my eyes, that he might be formally disciplined, possibly demoted. Termination was still possible if legal decided the expense issues were intentional. I need you with me right now, he said. I folded my hands. With you, how? People need to see we're solid, that this hasn't broken us. If Whitfield thinks he can use you to humiliate me, I laughed once. Not because it was funny, because even then, at the edge of losing the career image he had guarded more tenderly than our marriage, Preston was still asking me to perform stability for his audience. You want me to stand beside you. You're my wife. Am I? He looked at me like the question annoyed him. I stood, walked upstairs, opened the jewelry box on my dresser, and took out the ring I had worn for 18 years. The diamond was modest because we had bought it when Preston was still pretending partnership mattered more than appearances. I carried it back downstairs and placed it on the kitchen table between us. Preston stared at it. What are you doing? I didn't embarrass you, I said. I exposed you. Those are two very different things. Evelyn, don't be ridiculous. You told me to be easy. I am done being easy to diminish. His face changed. For the first time, I saw fear behind the anger. You can't just walk away after 18 years. Watch me. I packed a suitcase that night. Not everything, just enough. Clothes, documents, my grandmother's earrings, the sketchbooks I had kept hidden in the guest room closet because Preston once told me drawing was a hobby for people with time to waste. My hands shook while I zipped the suitcase. Courage is not always clean. Sometimes it trembles and does the thing anyway. I slept that night on my cousin Monique's sofa. She opened the door in a head wrap and robe, looked at my suitcase and said only, "Come in, baby." That was family too. Not the kind that tells you to keep quiet for appearances, the kind that makes tea at midnight and does not ask questions until morning. I did not run into Harrison Whitfield's arms. I want that understood because people love a neat story more than they love a true one. They wanted to turn it into romance immediately, the forgotten heroine and the powerful man who searched for her. But I had spent 18 years being shaped by one man's needs. I was not about to hand my becoming to another one, no matter how gently he held it. I moved into a small one-bedroom apartment across town. The kitchen faucet leaked. The bedroom faced a brick wall. The couch came from Monique's basement and had one cushion softer than the others. I loved that apartment with a fierceness that surprised me because everything in it was mine. The silence was mine. The chipped mug in the sink was mine. The decision to eat cereal for dinner without explaining myself was mine. The divorce took 4 months. Preston did not fight as much as I expected. At first I thought that meant some part of him understood. Then I realized he was too consumed by his unraveling at work to spend much energy on ours. The investigation confirmed enough to damage him, though not enough to destroy him. He was demoted from operations management to a smaller compliance-adjacent role with less authority, less visibility, and a much smaller office. Kiara Bennett received public credit for the cost reduction model that should have carried her name from the beginning. The expense reports were repaid. His executive track quietly ended. I did not celebrate that. I mean it. I never wanted Preston ruined. I wanted truth to enter the rooms where he had been lying. Once it did, I found I did not need to stand there and watch every consequence land. Freedom is too precious to spend staring backward. I saw him once more at the courthouse when we signed the final papers. He looked older, tired in a way his expensive suit could not hide. "I hope you're happy," he said. I could not tell whether he meant it as a curse or a wish. "I hope that for both of us," I said. He looked away first. Harrison gave me space during those months. He sent one card after the divorce finalized. Cream paper, simple handwriting. "I am glad you are free to hear your own name again. No demand, no invitation tucked underneath, no pressure." That was why, when he asked later whether I would visit a foundation Whitfield Holdings funded, I said yes. The foundation supported women rebuilding after controlling and abusive marriages, not just emergency shelters, though they helped with those too, job training, temporary housing assistance, legal referrals, therapy vouchers, childcare stipends, workshops on finances, resumes, boundaries, all the practical pieces people love to ignore when they tell women to just leave. Walking into that building for the first time felt like walking into a room full of mirrors I had been avoiding. Women in their 30s, 40s, 60s, some with children, some without, some loud with relief, some quiet with shock, all of them learning the same impossible lesson. Surviving is not the same thing as living, and leaving is only the first door. At first, I volunteered in the pantry because canned goods made sense to me. Boxes could be sorted, lists could be checked. Need could be met one shelf at a time. Then I started helping with intake forms because I knew how to listen without rushing people into neat answers. Eventually, someone asked if I would speak at a small workshop about starting over in midlife. I almost said no. Then I remembered Harrison standing in a ballroom, telling 300 people that my choice on a rainy road had mattered. So I said yes. My first talk lasted 8 minutes. My hands shook the entire time. I told the women that I had spent years mistaking peacekeeping for peace. I told them that being called difficult by someone committed to your smallness might be the first honest compliment you ever receive. I told them I did not know what came after leaving, but I knew the air was different there. Afterward, a woman named Patrice hugged me so hard my earrings pressed into my neck. "I thought it was just me," she whispered. That was when I understood that a voice does not have to be perfect to be useful. It only has to be true. Harrison and I became friends slowly, not the polite kind of friends people claim to be when everybody knows they are waiting for something else. Real friends. He called sometimes to ask how a workshop went. I called once because my car made a noise I did not trust and I needed a mechanic recommendation, not a rescuer. We talked about books and weather and the absurd price of decent coffee. He told me about the years after his accident, how pain had humbled him before success inflated him again, how he had to learn gratitude more than once. He never treated me like I owed him wonder. I never treated him like he owed me rescue. Something grew in that space because neither of us tried to force it. 9 months after the gala, the foundation held its annual benefit dinner in a ballroom not unlike the one where everything had changed. This time, I was not standing in a corner in a dress chosen to keep someone else comfortable. I wore deep green because I loved it. My hair was swept up with gold pins Monique insisted made me look expensive in a righteous way, and for once I let myself believe her. I stood at the podium and looked out at a room full of donors, volunteers, advocates, and women who had rebuilt themselves from less than certainty. Harrison sat in the front row. He did not look proud like he owned any part of me. He looked glad. That difference mattered. For a long time, I told the room, I believed quiet meant strong. I believed disappearing a little more each year was what a good woman did to keep a home together. I thought if I could become easy enough, small enough, agreeable enough, then maybe the marriage would finally feel peaceful. The room stayed still. But peace that requires your disappearance is not peace. It is captivity with better manners. A few women nodded. 20 years ago, I climbed into a ditch in a storm to help a stranger survive. For years, I forgot that woman. I let somebody convince me she was ordinary, uneducated, unimpressive, embarrassing. But she was never gone. She was waiting for me to stop asking permission to be her again. My voice did not shake. Sometimes strength is not staying quiet. Sometimes strength is letting the world hear your name. The applause rose slowly, then fully, not the empty applause of polite, rich people grateful a speech has ended. Recognition. I could feel it moving through the room from women who knew exactly what it cost to say such things out loud. Afterward, Harrison found me near the edge of the ballroom with 2 glasses of champagne. "You were extraordinary," he said. "Careful," I said, taking 1 glass. "I might start believing you." "Good." We stood there smiling like people who had learned patience the hard way. Then he took a breath. "Would you have dinner with me sometime?" I lifted an eyebrow. "We've had dinner. Not foundation dinner. Not thank you dinner. Not because you saved my life 20 years ago." His smile softened. "Dinner because I would like to know the woman you are now, if she wants to be known." I looked at him, this man who had searched for a memory for 2 decades, and then had enough wisdom not to trap the real woman inside it. I thought about the road behind me, the navy dress, Preston's hand on my arm, the room turning toward me. The apartment with the leaky faucet, the women at the foundation, my own voice through a microphone. For the first time in a long time, yes did not feel like surrender. It felt like choice. "All right," I said, "but this time you don't have to search for me." Harrison's eyes warmed. "No?" I smiled. "This time I know exactly where I am."